Cue the non-existent intro music once more. Hello and welcome back. My name is Chance, and this is the Enjoyers, a Star Wars podcast. Again, title is it's a work in progress. I would love to hear your ideas because that's the best I got. Before we get started, I would like to make a blanket spoiler warning statement. We will be discussing, obviously, Obi-Wan Kenobi in the Disney Plus series. And there's pretty much all of Star Wars canon that could be spoiled for you, from Clone Wars to Rebels to the movies, any of the TV shows. So just like a blanket Star Wars spoiler warning. Yeah, so like I said, today we're going to be discussing part 4 of the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. But first, before we actually get into that, I was seeing I've been seeing many people making these different correlations between the 6 movies, the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, that all have Obi-Wan. And yes, Obi-Wan, even though he does die in episode 4, he's still in episode 5 and episode 6 as a Force ghost, as most of us are aware. So like I've been seeing these really cool correlations between the fact that Obi-Wan, the show, has 6 parts. So he's in 6 movies, and as well as the episodes themselves are actually labeled part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, and I'm assuming going to be part 5 and part 6. And they're numbered with Roman numerals, which none of the other Disney Plus shows do that. Well, not Boba Fett, not Mandalorian. And the movies themselves are also numbered using Roman numerals. So like people kind of made that correlation. And they're like, okay, well, what does that really mean? And I can't believe I actually didn't notice this before, because I've brought up all of these points in my previous podcast and how they correlate to the prequel movies. So part 1, we see Luke sitting on Owen and Beru's home pretending to be a pod racing, or pretending to be pod racing. And as we know, in episode 1 Phantom Menace, Anakin obviously has the super long pod racing scene. Going on to part 2, we see the clone trooper begging for money in the streets of Dayu. And as we know, in episode 2, Attack of the Clones, Obi-Wan is there and discovers the clone army that is being made for them. So he sees the start of it, and he sees where they're at currently. So kind of those, like, again, those two contrasting differences of the then and the now. But again, that correlation between part 2 of Obi-Wan and episode 2 of the Star Wars movie series. Moving on to part 3, this one was super easy, obviously. The correlation between Obi-Wan getting dragged through the fire by Darth Vader, as well as that just correlating straight up with Darth Vader being burned alive, right? Like, that one's a pretty easy one to make. So with that said, it's like, what, going into this, I was like, okay, what could happen in this episode that's like A New Hope? So I guess let's find out. And I think kind of going into it, I had a pretty good idea of what was going to be happening, considering what happened at the end of part 3. But like I said, we'll find it out. So to begin this episode, and this is actually the shortest of all the episodes, which I think is kind of a shame. I think this episode could have really benefited for just maybe 5 more minutes of content and 5 more minutes of dialogue here and there. We'll kind of break that down, and I'll explain that a little bit more towards the end. But overall, I did really enjoy it. Just not as much as the previous 3 parts. And don't get me wrong, like, I still had a lot of fun. There's just some things I wish they really would have added. So we open up part 4 with Tala and Ned B saving Obi-Wan and getting him off world. And I really wish they would have gone into, like, right here, like, a little bit more detail on exactly how they got the transport off world. Assuming they use some kind of connections that Tala has with the Empire. I'm kind of digging that too, just like in a little bit here as well. So we're going to be going through this obviously we're going to be going through this episode chronologically and just breaking down the different scenes and dialogue and stuff like that, and how that may correlate to things we've seen in the past or things we could see coming in the future. So they get Obi-Wan off world, and Obi-Wan, he's showing some serious injuries. He's fading in and out, like he's passing out pretty much. His arm is all burned up. And he needs to be put into the back to tank to help recover. While in the back to tank now on Jabim, we find this out in just a little bit. We see like the mirror images of Obi-Wan in his back to tank and Vader in his own back to tank. We see Obi-Wan struggling and seeming to be feeling like the physical pain of the altercation that he just had with, like, he's reliving it all over again. We see the flashes, we see the images of the battle they just had. And Vader, we see that is intercut with Vader also sensing like the same thing, and he's feeling that pain that Obi-Wan is currently having, and he's like feeding off that. Like, you can feel that he's like proud of himself. He's holding his chest high. He's breathing in deep. His eyes are open. He's just staring forward. You just see that contrast between their two approaches there, between what's happening to one and the other at the exact same time. One of the shots I thought was actually kind of cool there is like you get a close up of like Vader's eyes, and we get to see like the dark and deep shades of red within them, which is pretty stunning and pretty scary. And also, I think we should note that like he's just opening his eyes under a back to tank. So like, I know some people do that, and like, going to swimming pools, but like that's not going to be good for your eyes. But maybe back to tank water is probably a little bit different. Obi-Wan, he finally starts coming to, and he pulls himself out of the back to tank, even though Tala is trying to tell him not to and saying you're not healed. He goes, your burns. Tala says, your burns, your body. You just need time. Obi-Wan, not even acknowledging these concerns at all, just asks, where's Leia? We cut to Leia being held captive in the Inquisitor headquarters, and begins to get questioned by Reva. I actually wonder if like the other Inquisitors are in on the questioning and in on Reva's plan. I assume they all like left Mapuzo together. Like they all showed up together. Maybe they were coming from different spots. Maybe they have their own different ships. But like, assuming they left Mapuzo together, but we don't see any disagreements with the kidnapping of Leia for now the second time, which obviously the Grand Inquisitor in part 2 was pretty against. But yeah, I don't know. It's just something I was kind of thinking about. I was like, they're not really, the other Inquisitors aren't really featured in this episode. So maybe they didn't care. Like, yeah, you did it once, do it again. Or maybe they're just like sick of her, and like she has this power itch that she was displaying by even forcing them to do the things that she wanted to do in the last episode, that, they're just letting her do whatever now. Leia, as usual, is great during these interactions between her and Reva. It opens up on her handcuffed, sitting at this table. My father is Bail Organa. He's a senator. Very like, my dad is a lawyer type of energy coming from Leia. And she's being bold and proclaiming, I'm a princess of Alderaan. Reva comes in. That's cute, she says. Leia then claims that Obi-Wan will come and find her. And then Reva responds with, Obi-Wan is dead. And you can see Leia trying to grapple this information. It's almost like she's trying to decide whether or not she believes Reva or not. Also, I think, this is kind of a side note, but I think this is the first time that Leia hears directly spoken to her that his name is Obi-Wan and not Ben. I know she's like been in the same room when people have brought up Obi-Wan being his name, but this is the first time I think that she's been directly speaking with somebody and they refer to him as Obi-Wan. So yeah, I don't necessarily know what to make of that. She doesn't seem super confused by it, but I don't know. Reva then continues on saying, nobody is coming for you, which is something that Leia has heard now pretty much every episode, from the bounty hunters on Dayu telling her no one's coming, from Obi-Wan when they were stuck on Mapuzo, and now Reva. That's like it's gotta be a very scary thing to hear, especially as a 10-year-old. Like, you're trapped in these situations and you're hearing people that have kidnapped you, people that you're even trusting, just telling you that nobody is coming. But Leia handles herself very well. Back on Jabim, Obi-Wan, he's now brandishing a new classic Jedi like tunic look. It looks great. Not really hiding the fact that he's a Jedi, but still. they ask Obi-Wan and Tala ask a new character, Roken, for help. Roken seemingly being the man in charge of the Path, the anti-imperial network set up to help Jedi and Force-sensitive children find safety, is at first very reluctant to help, even telling Tala that Obi-Wan needs to be off on the first transport off of Jabim. Almost immediately when he comes in, telling him that, like, no, he can't be here. He's going to draw way too much attention to them and possibly risk everything that they've set up there. Even though the operation is seemingly, like, small and secretive, Roken doesn't want to take any chances with the whole Empire out there looking for Obi-Wan. Once seeing their operation and what we know from Tala, they seem like the start of like a rebel cell, at least in my eyes. Even though they may not refer to them as such, we know from Star Wars Rebels that there are a lot of rebel cells, and that those cells themselves don't actually know about the others out there, as to avoid compromising all of the rebellion and all the other cells if they are caught. Obi-Wan continues to plead for help, telling Roken that it's somebody important to him and has been taken by the Empire. Roken then responds with, "General, I'm sorry, but that's not my problem." I was pretty taken back by the fact that he called Obi-Wan General. Makes me wonder what Roken has seen or what he has lived through. Was he around during the Clone Wars? Does he have anything to do with the Clone Wars? Or is he just like knowledgeable about who Obi-Wan is, who Obi-Wan was during the Clone Wars? He doesn't seem too surprised to see him there alive. But I don't know. Yeah, like when's the last time that Obi-Wan was referred to as General Kenobi? I don't know. Tala informs him that Leia knows everything about their operations and implies that the Empire will get it out of her. If she, assuming Tala was referring to Reva, finds us, we need to prepare for an evacuation. Roken says that we can't shut down this place, that everything runs through there. Obi-Wan again pleading, telling Roken that you have no idea what the Empire is capable of. Roken goes on to say that he used to have a Force-sensitive wife, saying that the Inquisitors got to her, even though they tried to hide it. I know exactly what the Empire can do. And I feel like these dark stories are starting to hit Obi-Wan a little bit differently than they were before. Before, I think they used to induce the PTSD in him. But here it almost seems like he's more understanding and compassionate towards Roken and what he has gone through. Not blaming himself for the state the galaxy's in, but wanting to help and wanting to make it right. Roken realizes that he cannot afford to evacuate the base. He can't afford to move the operations. But he also cannot get his position compromised. So he ultimately agrees to help Tala and Obi-Wan. He ends up sharing the limited information they have about the Inquisitor's headquarters. It's located on the water moon of Nur in the Mustafar system. Saying they got this information off the grid while it was being constructed, but that's all they really know. Obi-Wan trying to give suggestions for a plan of attack. He's met with negative feedback on pretty much everything that he suggests. He is told that it's a suicide mission and that they are not fighters, and indicating that Obi-Wan is still injured. Tala says that she will go with him, that she's an officer and has clearance. When asked if her cover is still intact, she says that they will have to find out. And here I really wish that they would have explained that she could have used her officer clearance codes to get them off Mapuzo. I think this is kind of like a slight oversight and would have helped clear some things up. But again, she does have connections, so maybe the ship that they used was clear to exit without having to identify herself, considering it is an Imperial ship, and that once they land on the Inquisitor headquarters, you can see lots of them there. So a little Easter egg here that I noticed when they're in the background, or when they're there discussing this plan, you can actually see in the background just this little droid sitting there, and you may have heard of him, but his name is R2-D2. He's seemingly just like hanging out, chilling in the background. So we saw C-3PO and Alderaan in part 1, and now we see R2-D2 here. And so we know that Bail and the Organas are their owners. Example of Bail sending R2 and C-3PO on an escort mission to escort a minister in an episode of Rebels. So it seems like Bail is playing a larger part in the Path than what we currently know. One thing else that was interesting is, like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's not R2, but he's sitting there and Obi-Wan doesn't even acknowledge him. Like he served R2 worked with him for so long, and he literally just doesn't even say hi, doesn't give him a fist bump, nothing, just walks past him. Like, so maybe it's not R2, but I don't know. So off they go to the Inquisitor headquarters, and I should have known a little bit more about this when I talked about it on our last podcast. But this series is not actually the first time that we see or visit Nur. In the video game Jedi Fallen Order, Cal Kestis, the main character, actually heads to the Inquisitor headquarters to end up retrieving a Jedi holocron taken from them by the second sister. Having played that game, I think it's actually pretty cool that we get to return here and see this in major canon in a TV show like this, in mainstream canon. So on the ship on the way there, we see Obi-Wan practicing with the Force again, telling Tala that he'll be all right. Your body's not the only thing that needs to heal. The past is a hard thing to forget, and you just need time. Seems like she's talking from experience here. Obi-Wan responds with, some things cannot be forgotten. If you care about Leia, well, then you're going to have to try. Again, I think these stories and these words and hearing them from people around him are starting to actually build his hopes back up instead of tear him back down again. I think when he started to open up to the Force, I think he started to have a little bit more hope and realize his purpose and what he needs to do. Reva continues to interrogate Leia, claiming they first heard of the path on an intercepted transmission from a different planet, Balnab. Saying they have found safe houses in 2 systems. We see Reva slam down the Jedi crest cut out from the last hideout, again showing her hatred for the Jedi, assuming for what they did or maybe did not do for her in her past. Then telling Leia that Reva needs to find the other hideouts. I'm not really sure why she thinks Leia is so involved with the path, and why she thinks a 10-year-old would know about a lot of these. Like clearly Leia was using the path to get out, and obviously like you kidnapped her and she was rescued, and so they're trying to get her out. It's not like she's like running the whole thing, right? Like she was using it, she doesn't know about it. So I thought that was kind of like a weird thing that Reva was trying to get out of her. But anyways, Leia brushes that off and asks, how did he die? He burned to death on Mapuzo. It kind of seemed like Leia didn't believe Reva at first. She's not crying. She's not freaking out by the news. She did seem a little worried, though. And she started looking back and forth from Reva to the Jedi crest. And then claims that she knows nothing about the path. Reva gets visibly upset by this response. Tala lands at the station at Inquisitor headquarters. Most people not really seeming to care, but there was not seeming to really care or notice her. But there was one officer I noticed as they were walking past. He kind of looked back over his shoulder as they passed each other. So maybe like raising some suspicions that she's out of place, but no one seemed too caught off guard by it. Tala stopped at a checkpoint trying to convince the security guard, and I actually think he was the lead security guard on that level, to let her through. The guard is suspicious, but only because it's not her sector denying her access. Tala threatens him. Perhaps I should just inform the Grand Inquisitor of your insolence, she says. And at first, when she said this, I thought that this is where she was going to get caught. Thinking that the security guard would know what happened to the Grand Inquisitor, and Tala didn't. But the threat actually worked, and Tala is through. So either the security guard doesn't know about the Grand Inquisitor's health as well as Tala, or, and what I think is actually more likely, is they both know that the Grand Inquisitor is alive and his health is improving. The security guard seemed visibly like fearful for what Tala was saying, threatening him with going to the Grand Inquisitor. And again, we know that he is alive because of what happens in Star Wars Rebels and the events that transpire in that show. So Tala gets inside and she gets into the system, and she ends up guiding Obi-Wan to an underwater entrance. Once inside, Obi-Wan takes out a stormtrooper and gains his access key. Reva starts going all good cop and bad cop, and I feel like that was kind of a tough approach with only one person, but she ends up trying to read Leia's mind. Leia breaks the concentration by saying, "Is this a staring contest?" Unable to read her mind, Reva knows that Leia is strong. The braver you seem, the more afraid you are. I learned that at a very young age as well. Again, more backstory developing here for Reva, even though it is pretty vague when she does talk about herself and her past. While diving into this, Leia actually sent out Lola, and Reva stops the attack from Lola. And I was actually kind of curious as what Lola was going to try to do. Maybe try to like stun her, like we've seen R2 do before. Reva stops Lola using the Force and is holding her or levitating her in her hand. I had a droid when I was younger too. It was taken from me, like everything else. I know what it's like being alone. The people you are trying to protect, they're not coming for you. Again, they're not coming for you. The only person that can save you is you. These people, they will leave you to die. So again, like this is just this very dark stuff from Reva, and it almost feels like exactly how Reva either is currently feeling or has felt in the past. Only being able to counter herself, and it seems like it's been something that she's physically lived through in her time. Leia says she'll help Reva if she can talk to her dad first. Reva's not having any of it and finally giving up, sends her into the interrogation room. Tala tries to guide Obi-Wan to the detention area. While guiding Obi-Wan, even Tala is shocked at the magnitude of the station and wondering what they're keeping down there. Her presence and shock at the discovery of what she's seeing and what she's finding definitely grabs the attention of the people around her. But she actually quickly takes care of what seems to be a commanding officer coming up and asking her what she's doing there. That's not her post. Just physically manhandling this dude like behind everybody else. Obi-Wan trying to avoid being found by passing stormtroopers. They overheard his comlink when Tala tried to reach out to him. He uses the Force to make a distant noise, guiding the stormtroopers away from him. And it seems like he's trying pretty hard to do this. He's focusing really hard to use the Force here. But it seems like he's starting to get back in touch with the Force and get back to his older self. Obi-Wan finds a secure sector and discovers that it is actually a tomb for fallen Jedi. This place isn't a fortress. It's a tomb, he says, as he's looking at one of the fallen Jedi inside of the tomb. The Jedi that he's looking at there in that tomb is actually Jedi Master Tera Sanubi. Master Sanubi was a Jedi Master and served on the Jedi High Council during the High Republic era. And we've seen him before in actually a few episodes of Clone Wars. Notably an episode where he and Ahsoka actually team up to find Ahsoka's stolen lightsabers. He always preached patience to Ahsoka throughout this whole entire episode, and it was a main theme for him. So maybe this theme of patience and Obi-Wan seeing him and probably having some kind of connection to him. Obviously, he had to have known him in some capacity. It hits home for him, for sure. In the first wide shot we see of the tomb looking down the hallway. In the far right tomb, we actually see a Jedi that at first glance, I thought it was actually Plo Koon. But after pausing and really looking at it, I noticed that it wasn't him. But could potentially be Master Coleman Kaj, who sat on the Jedi Council with Obi-Wan in the prequel era. Although it's not confirmed, it could just be another member of that same species. And as Obi-Wan's walking around, we see he's looking at the faces of all these other Jedi, and not many of them, if any at all, are actually identifiable in current canon. But this scene reminds me of the facility that the Empire actually took Grogu to test his blood in season 2 of Mandalorian. There was a strong belief then that the blood of Grogu was going to be used to fuel Emperor Palpatine and his ultimate return in Episode 9. That's going to be like kind of like the explanation for it if we ever actually get one. So I have a strong belief that these fallen Jedi are being preserved and I'm assuming they're also being studied as part of a deeper plan to possibly prolong the life of Emperor Palpatine. As Obi-Wan walks through the tomb, we're intercut with the interrogation of Leia by Reva in the interrogation room. Obi-Wan, seemingly stunned by what he is seeing, finally comes to and hears Leia's cries for help when he is looking at the tomb of a youngling. Obi-Wan instructs Tala that he needs a distraction and fast. Tala distracts Riva by actually sending down an officer telling her that she has urgent news. Riva leaves the interrogation room and goes to meet Tala in actually the Inquisitor room, which I thought was pretty interesting. I don't know why they would meet there specifically. Maybe she was told to be brought there. Not entirely sure. But Tala ultimately tells her that the path is on Florm. Riva not really being able to tell if she's lying, and actually says, unless of course you're lying. Trying to get her to admit she's a spy, and Tala says, of course I am. And Riva's clearly taken back by this. Tala tries flipping the story around, saying that she was spying on the path from the inside. Riva says, I do like a good liar. I don't know if you're lying to me or for me, but we'll see. And honestly, it's a great plan by Tala, both lying and telling the truth to throw off Riva and like what she can and cannot sense. Tala is a spy, which is true, but it's not for her side. Obi-Wan is not on Florm, but maybe there is a path there. It seems like she kind of has to give a truth with a lie. So maybe she is compromising a hideout there, which maybe is something we will delve into in later episodes. But I feel like Riva may have been able to sense if she was lying about both of those statements about Obi-Wan not being on that planet and there also not being a path there. I feel like she would be able to tell if she was lying on both of those accounts. But if one of those is true and one of those is false, she can sense the lie but doesn't know which one the lie is. While this is going on, Obi-Wan gets Leia out of the interrogation chamber by cutting the lights and taking out the stormtroopers. And this was actually a really cool scene. I don't think I'll ever get over like the whole dark room lightsaber igniting. It's so cool. And it seems like Obi-Wan's kind of getting his old self back. Opting to actually use the lightsaber right away here, which is the first time we've seen him use it in the opening of a fight. Usually he's using, his fists or a blaster of some kind. After Tala gets away from the stormtroopers, we cut back to Obi-Wan, who is fighting off stormtroopers of his own while using his lightsaber. He ends up holding together a shattered window while deflecting blaster fire, and he ultimately ends up breaking several of the windows and flooding that whole chamber of stormtroopers. And it was great seeing Obi-Wan using his lightsaber again, and he's clearly starting to regain some of his Force connection, and that's like some pretty strong, powerful stuff that he's trying to do there. And the water rushing into that hallway there reminds me again of something similar that happens in Jedi Fallen Order at that very same base. Not sure if it's like meant to be an homage to it. It's probably not, but it's a cool thing nonetheless, and that's definitely like what my mind jumped to right away. After they leave the hallway and get out of that whole situation, they proceed to try to smuggle Leia out under a trench coat, which they've taken off of a fallen officer. And it was admittedly an odd choice. And it got a laugh out of me, and just seeing it was quite ridiculous. I feel like they could have had a different approach, maybe like wrapped Leia up and then had Obi-Wan carry her and pass it off to something else. I'm not sure. Maybe even putting her on Obi-Wan's back and getting some, Luke carrying Yoda on Dagobah vibes or something like that. But I feel like both of those situations could have been a little bit less obvious than 4 feet under a long trench coat. But ultimately, the chaos of the situation got them to at least get to the hangar before being stopped. On their way to the hangar, we get our first shot, actually, of the fifth brother, visibly frustrated with the current situation. The third sister will suffer for this. This is her doing. Riva and tons of troopers end up surrounding Tala and Obi-Wan in the hangar. It seems like pretty much all is lost there, and they're going to end up getting captured again before they are actually saved by two pilots, Wade and Sully, from the Jabim. I want to say rebel cell, but they're claiming themselves to not be rebels, but anti-imperial, whatever you want to call them. They come in and end up shooting up the hangar, taking out tons of stormtroopers, and at least buying time for Obi-Wan and Leia and Tala to get out of there. This whole scene was honestly like, it was really cool. It's just an overall action scene. I really enjoyed it. One thing I actually thought was pretty funny too is we see a little gonk droid get caught in the crossfire and ends up scurrying away, and it was actually quite hilarious. I do wish Obi-Wan would have pulled out the lightsaber again here. Everyone knows that it's him. Everyone knows that he's there. I thought it would have been really cool to have him pull out the lightsaber and maybe have like a little fight with the third sister, buying time for Tala and Leia to get out of there. But maybe that would have been too reminiscent of the previous episode and his sacrifice to Vader. And maybe he's also like, maybe he doesn't think he's strong enough to do that yet. He's looked really good against a bunch of stormtroopers, but that's like most likely no match for the power and how strong Reva is. The pilot Wade ends up holding off Reva long enough for Sully to take off with Obi-Wan, Leia, and Tala. Wade isn't able to actually get away fast enough and is brought down by some explosives that Reva force pushed to him. Once back on and safe in the transport, piloted by Roken, and after asking about Wade, and we see the sorrow and the sadness that's in Sully's face and the emotions that she's trying to keep herself together, Tala says, "I guess you're soldiers now after all." Kind of a callback, obviously, to previously in the episode when Sully said we're not soldiers and didn't want them to really have to put themselves out there and go and fight. But the Tala's remark of "I guess you're soldiers after all now" is, I think that's kind of like the birth of Rebels in that cell on the transport. Leia and Obi-Wan end up holding hands, and it was so cute. Leia reaches her little hand out there, and they comfort each other, and it was really just a touching moment. And again, like, you see Obi-Wan give just a slight little smirk there to Leia. Back at the Inquisitor HQ, Vader is clearly not happy, in just a very frightening manner, and I love seeing the anger and the power that Vader continually shows. Like, he just doesn't disappoint. He ends up running into the room and force choking Reva, but ends up releasing her after Reva says that she put a tracker on them. And I thought she was lying for sure. I was like, there's no way, this is 100% a lie. This is how she's gonna try to get out of here and make a break for it. She ended up saying that she let them go on purpose, and which I think that has to be a lie, because there's no way that Reva would let Obi-Wan go like that. Not after how long she's been searching in her passion for catching Obi-Wan, and that passion that she's displayed. I don't think that she was necessarily telling the truth about that. This is why I also at first thought like the tracker was a lie. Vader puts her down and says, I may have underestimated you. The fifth brother speaks up, kind of mad that Reva isn't getting punished for this. Vader then advances on her. There can be no mistakes, which is an absolutely chilling scene and such a good portrayal of Vader. Like, they absolutely just nailed him, and you just feel his presence, and it's just so good. I love the way they've portrayed that character, and they don't miss. Like, they don't miss with Vader in any show. He's so good. We find out soon after that Reva actually did, in fact, compromise Lola, and put a tracker inside of Leia's droid, which is actually pretty smart of Reva. And I don't want to say that I'm surprised, but she's really thinking ahead there, and that's obviously going to pose an issue, and it's presumably something that's going to have to be addressed fairly quickly. That's how we close the episode. I think a major theme or a major tone of this episode is we see Obi-Wan tapping back into the Force and growing stronger, getting back to like his old self. We don't see any of the PTSD visions that he's had in the previous episodes, whether that was the flashbacks of the prequels or in part 3 when he saw the mirage of Anakin. We don't see anything like that in this episode. So maybe like his reconnection with the Force is helping him suppress and control those thoughts, and like I said, get back to his old self. And we see him do that fairly quickly. You know, he was struggling on the transport on the way over there to force pull like the little piece of metal that was there. We kind of see him struggling a little bit. But when he's in the fight with the stormtroopers, he does obviously an unreal job deflecting all their blaster fire, And the whole scene with him holding in the breaking window, holding in that water and that pressure, that must be insanely hard. And then for him to let it go, not just let that one window go, but it seems like he almost breaks all of them with the force there, which is quite insane. So maybe this is kind of like, he gets back on the bike, and it's similar to like riding a bike. You never really, they always say that you never really forget how to ride a bike. Go years without doing it, you can hop on, you can figure it out in a little bit. Maybe that's like too easy of a thing to compare it to, but that's kind of what my mind's going towards. I can draw parallels from this to Luke in with his connection to the Force in The Last Jedi. At this beginning of that movie, he's completely cut himself off from the Force for presumably years. He doesn't really use the Force all too much throughout that whole movie. He has like the one scene where he breaks open the hut that Rey was in, but at the end of the movie, he's able to force project himself across the galaxy, which is obviously like a major feat. He was cut off from the Force for a long time, and then he was able to, to pick it back up and do something that strong. And obviously, it ended up perishing because of it. And we could debate that, that one scene in The Last Jedi for hours, but still, I think the comparison is still there. And it was really fun being able to see Obi-Wan start to get that groove back, seeing him wield the lightsaber and just tear up some stormtroopers. It was a lot of fun. And so, like I said at the beginning, like I brought up at the beginning of the podcast, a lot of correlations have been made between each of the parts and their corresponding numerical movie. So this being part 4, the 4th Star Wars movie being A New Hope. In this case, in this episode, where they rescue her from a detention area, and in episode 4, a detention floor. It's a very easy parallel to make there. And so overall, like I said earlier, I really did like the episode. I didn't love it. I had a lot of fun with it. I did enjoy watching it and rewatching it, but we don't get... My biggest gripe is we don't get what I thought was so good about the other ones, about the previous episodes, and that was the character development and the monologue that we were getting out of Obi-Wan. And not even necessarily monologue, but just like the emotions and the expressions that we could feel and see on Obi-Wan, just like to describe his situations. I feel like we kind of got away from that a little bit. We still learned a little bit about him in some areas, but I feel like they kind of got away from that in what they did in the first 3 episodes. And I thought that kind of brought down the episode as a whole. It didn't have as much depth in that sense, and it was more so, I don't want to say a filler episode, because it was still important in the actions that happened, but it left me wanting more. Like I said, I think the episode could have been longer to ultimately have more of that dialogue. Even just narratively describing situations just a little bit better, I think would have been very good. I love the interactions that Reva and Leia had. And her, obviously sensing that she has Force powers. And I really wonder if Leia will, I shouldn't say will, but if Leia knew that she was using the Force at all, or if she's just like that inherently strong with it, or if the Force itself is trying to protect her. I'm not sure if she was, because that seems like a pretty strong thing to have to do. And yeah, so I guess this leads us to what's next. What do we expect coming out of this episode and going into part 5? I noticed in this episode we actually, for the first time, didn't get a Force meditation or a call out from Obi-Wan reaching out to Qui-Gon. That being said, I think next week is the week. If they continue with the theme of having some reference or some parallel drawn between the Obi-Wan episode and that corresponding movie, that would mean part 5 would have some reference to Empire Strikes Back. And I think we could get possibly a reference to Luke's training on Dagobah. And maybe we end up seeing Yoda and getting a Yoda cameo, or Yoda helps Obi-Wan get in connection with Qui-Gon, or maybe it's just Qui-Gon talking to Obi-Wan. I think all those things are definitely possible, and I expect that to most likely be the reference. I know they didn't reference Qui-Gon in this episode, but maybe that's to kind of catch us off guard or surprise us with him next week. And I think Yoda is still a possibility here, and I know some people may be like, well, Yoda's still alive at this point, and you're right, he is. But we've seen in Star Wars Rebels, Kanan and Ezra have actually 2 separate interactions with Yoda, who is still alive at the time. And granted, those interactions are in a Jedi temple on Lothal, but Yoda is obviously still strong enough in the Force to be able to have those conversations from that great of a distance, right? And so maybe it has to be circumstantial in that in that Obi-Wan will have to get to a Jedi temple. Maybe I could see like he is meditating and he's drawn to the Force, and the Force is telling him to go to this location, like we see so many times that we saw like with Luke in Empire Strikes Back when he has to go into the cave. It just countless times when people are drawn through the Force to these hidden Jedi temples. And so maybe there's one on whatever planet they end up going to, whether it's back to Jabim, whether they go to a different planet because they have to run because of the tracking beacon that they got on there. Maybe he goes to a Jedi temple and they find an old abandoned one or whatever it may be, and he gets that talk with Qui-Gon or Yoda or something like that. I think that would be really cool. I think it'd be really satisfying to see. But again, I don't know. I want to say I don't expect any of that to happen, but maybe after this episode, I take back my super high expectation of Qui-Gon showing up. But I think that would be such a great parallel to make between Part 5 and Empire Strikes Back. But ultimately, we don't know, or I guess I should say I don't know what's going to happen with the story, which is ultimately a good thing. Like, you don't want to be able to predict things super easily and watch my prediction of a Jedi temple and be true, but I don't know. I would love if it happened. I'm not going to be upset if it doesn't. I might be a little upset if we don't get Qui-Gon at some point. But obviously, they're going to be going back to Jabim and regrouping. And we're going to see what happens with like the tracker within Lola. Will they be able to catch it before they get back? Does that force them to have to pick up their whole operation and move? Is there going to be casualties? Is there going to be like a rebel cell that comes in defense of Jabim? There could be so many things that happen, and I'm not really sure, which is good. I'm excited. I'm excited for these next couple episodes and what they entail. That's all we have for us today. Thank you guys again for listening, for watching. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. Follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/chancey, and follow me on Twitter at chancey_ttv. Expect the next episode to be out probably the Sunday following the Part 5 release, and then heading into the finale, and then we're going to be closing out Obi-Wan. So as much fun of a ride as it's been, it seems like it's going so quick, and obviously with only 6 episodes it's going to feel like that, but I'm excited for where this show is going, and I'm excited to talk about it more and further discuss it. So anyways, thank you guys for hanging out again, and I will see you all next time.